What if I told you some families don't fall apart because of one big mistake, but because nobody ever learns how to say, "I'm not okay." And one day, it all explodes. Not in a fight, not in a crisis, but at a dinner table where everything looks perfect. The Carter family looked perfect. From the outside, they were exactly what people admired. A quiet suburban house outside Chicago, warm lights through old windows, Thanksgiving dinners that looked like something out of a movie, a successful daughter, a responsible son, a strong father, a caring mother, everything exactly how it was supposed to be. At least, that's what everyone believed. Because inside that house, nobody actually talked about anything real. Not the son who lost everything. Not the daughter whose marriage was quietly falling apart. Not the father who didn't know how to love without control. Not the mother who was slowly disappearing, trying to hold everyone together. And definitely not the son who left for 3 years. Lucas Carter didn't come home. No holidays, no birthdays, no explanations. Just silence. The kind of silence that families learn to live with instead of fixing. They still set a plate for him every Thanksgiving, not because they believed he would come, but because pretending he still belonged hurt less than accepting he might not. Until that night. The turkey was almost ready. The table was set, 6 plates, and then a 7th, same as every year, same quiet hope, same unspoken tension. Then the doorbell rang. Nobody moved at first, because in families like this, you don't react. You wait. You pretend. You hope someone else handles it. But this time, someone did. And when the door opened, everything they had spent years avoiding walked right back into the house. Lucas stood there, older, colder, different, not broken, but not the same person who left. And in that moment, something shifted. Because this wasn't just a reunion, it was a collision between who they thought they were and everything they had been avoiding. That night was never going to be a normal dinner. It was the night everything came out. The resentment, the disappointment, the truth nobody wanted to say out loud, and the realization that sometimes the people you love the most are the ones you understand the least. So, I'll ask you something. Before we go any further, have you ever sat at a table like that, where everyone smiles, but nobody is actually okay? Because what happened next didn't just change that dinner. It changed how this family understood love forever. Before everything fell apart, this family had a system, not a healthy one, but a system that worked just enough to keep things looking stable. David Carter believed in one thing above everything else: control. Not loud control, not aggressive, but the kind that hides behind words like responsibility, discipline, doing what's best. He didn't think he was hurting anyone. In his mind, he was protecting them, preparing them for a world that didn't forgive weakness. The problem was, his version of love came with conditions, unspoken ones, but clear enough for his children to understand early. You succeed, you're valued, you struggle, you're a problem. Claire understood that first. She was the oldest, so she adapted. Perfect grades, perfect career path, perfect life on the outside. The kind of daughter people pointed at and said, "You did everything right with her." But what nobody saw was that Claire didn't build a life. She built a performance. Because somewhere along the way, she stopped asking, what makes me happy, and started asking, what keeps me accepted? Ben reacted differently. He followed the same path at first. Success, stability, structure, everything his father respected, until it collapsed. Job gone, marriage gone, confidence gone, and instead of asking for help, he did what he had been taught his entire life. Stay quiet, handle it yourself, don't show weakness. So from the outside, he looked like he was just going through a phase. But inside, he was slowly disappearing. And then there was Lucas, the one who didn't fit, the one who didn't adjust, the one who didn't perform. Lucas didn't want structure. He didn't want approval. He didn't want a life that felt like it was already decided for him. He wanted space, freedom, a different version of success. And in a family built on control, that made him the problem. At first, it looked small. Arguments about school, about responsibility, about wasting potential. But over time, those arguments became something else, not disagreements, judgments. You're throwing your life away. You don't understand how the real world works. You'll regret this. Lucas heard all of it, over and over again, until eventually it stopped sounding like concern and started sounding like rejection. So he did the one thing nobody expected him to actually do. He left. No big speech, no dramatic exit, just distance. At first, they thought he would come back. People always come back, especially when they fail. But he didn't. Months passed, then a year, then 3. And the longer he stayed gone, the more uncomfortable the truth became. Because if Lucas didn't come back, it meant something worse than failure. It meant he didn't need them. And that was something David never prepared for. Meanwhile, Eleanor held everything together. Or at least, that's what it looked like. She didn't argue. She didn't confront. She didn't push anyone to talk about what was actually happening. Instead, she filled the silence with routines, with traditions, with dinners that looked normal enough to ignore the cracks underneath. Every Thanksgiving, she set the table the same way, same plates, same food, same order. And every year, she added one more thing. A plate for Lucas. Not because she was sure he would come, but because removing it would mean accepting he might not. And that was something she couldn't do. So the system continued. Claire pretending everything was fine. Ben pretending he would figure things out. David pretending control was still working. Eleanor pretending silence was keeping everyone safe. Until that night. Because systems like this don't break slowly. They hold and hold and hold until something forces the truth into the open. And this time, that something was standing at the front door. Dinner started the way it always did. Polite, controlled, careful. Plates passed around, wine poured. Small talk filling the space where real conversation should have been. Lucas sat at the far end of the table, not where he used to sit, not where he belonged, just somewhere that didn't disrupt the structure too much. Claire noticed it immediately. Of course she did. She always noticed everything, but she didn't say anything, because in this family, not saying things was how you survived. Ben talked more than usual, jokes that landed just a little too loud, stories that went on just a little too long, the kind of talking people do when silence feels dangerous. Eleanor kept moving, refilling plates that didn't need food, adjusting silverware that was already straight, keeping her hands busy, so she didn't have to sit still long enough to feel anything. And David barely looked at Lucas, not directly, not long enough to turn it into a moment, just quick glances, evaluating, measuring, the way he always did. "Work's been good?" David finally asked. Not warm, not cold, just neutral enough to sound normal. Lucas nodded slightly. "Yeah, construction." That was it. 2 sentences. And somehow, it said everything. Claire felt it immediately. That shift, that tiny drop in the room's energy. So small, most people wouldn't notice. But in families like this, those moments are loud. Construction, not law school, not business, not anything David understood. "Still doing the music thing?" David asked. Lucas shrugged. "Sometimes." Another pause, another look. That look. Not disappointment exactly. Something quieter, more controlled, more familiar. The kind of look that says, "You could have been more." Lucas set his fork down, slowly. Claire closed her eyes for half a second. Not now, too early, but it was already happening. Because moments like this don't start arguments. They trigger patterns, years of them. And once those patterns start, they don't stop halfway. Lucas leaned back slightly, not aggressive, not loud, just done pretending. "There it is," he said. The room froze. David frowned. "What?" Lucas looked at him directly now, first time since he sat down. "That look," he said quietly. And just like that, the dinner stopped being a dinner. It became something else. That look. The words stayed in the air longer than they should have. David didn't respond immediately. He just stared at Lucas, not angry, not yet, but calculating. "What look?" he asked. Lucas let out a quiet breath, not frustrated, more like tired. "The one where you decide I disappointed you," he said, before I even finished talking. Eleanor moved slightly. "Lucas," but he didn't stop, not this time. "I've seen it my whole life," he continued. "It doesn't matter what I say. You already know what you think." The table went still. Ben looked down at his glass. Claire stared at her plate. Emily didn't move at all, because everyone at that table knew exactly what he was talking about. David leaned back in his chair, slow, controlled. "You dropped out of college," he said, not loud, not emotional, just a statement. Lucas nodded. "I left." "You quit," David replied. And there it was, not the word itself, but the meaning behind it. Lucas laughed once, short, sharp. "No," he said. "I left because I was miserable." David's jaw tightened slightly. "That's how life works sometimes." Lucas shook his head. "No, that's how you think life works." Another pause. Longer this time. Heavier. "You think pushing people makes them stronger," Lucas said. "But all it does is make them feel like they're never enough." Claire closed her eyes again, because now, this wasn't tension anymore. This was truth, and truth in a family like this doesn't stay controlled for long. "I wanted you to have a future," David said. Lucas leaned forward slightly. "And I wanted to feel like a person." That landed, not because it was loud, but because it was honest. Ben shifted in his chair, uncomfortable, because that sentence wasn't just about Lucas. It applied to all of them. "You think I failed," Lucas continued, "but you never asked me what I actually wanted." David didn't answer, not right away, because for the first time, this wasn't a disagreement. It was a mirror, and he didn't like what it showed. The silence didn't calm things down. It made everything louder. Because once the truth is said out loud, you can't push it back where it came from. David leaned forward slightly, still controlled, still trying to hold the structure together. "So what?" he said. "You just walk away every time something gets hard?" Lucas shook his head, slow, deliberate. "No," he said. "I walked away because nobody in this house knew how to love people without controlling them." That was it. The line. The one you don't take back. The one that doesn't leave room for interpretation. Eleanor froze completely. Ben looked up. Claire's eyes snapped open. Because that wasn't just frustration. That was the core of everything. David's expression changed. Not loud anger, something sharper. "You think I controlled you?" he asked. Lucas didn't hesitate. "Yes," a single word, clear, final. "I gave you everything," David said. And there it was. The sentence every parent like him eventually uses. Lucas nodded slightly. "I know." "Then how can you say that?" David pushed. Lucas leaned forward, voice still calm, but now unfiltered. "Because you never gave me a choice," he said. Silence. "You gave me a path," Lucas continued. "A version of success that made sense to you." David didn't interrupt. "And every time I didn't follow it," Lucas paused. "You didn't try to understand me." Another pause. Short, but enough. "You tried to fix me." That landed harder than anything before, because deep down, David knew it wasn't entirely wrong. "You were throwing your life away," David said. Lucas let out a breath. "No," he said. "I was building a life you didn't recognize." Claire looked up at that, because that sentence hit her too. "You only respect things you understand," Lucas added. "And if you don't understand it," he shrugged slightly, "you assume it's wrong." The room felt smaller now, tighter. Ben's grip tightened around his glass, because he had lived inside that exact system. "I was trying to protect you," David said. Lucas nodded again. "I know," he replied, then quieter, more honest. But it never felt like protection. A pause. It felt like pressure. And just like that, the argument stopped being about decisions and became about damage. The room didn't explode. It cracked. No one spoke, because at this point, there was nothing left to argue. Lucas was quiet. David too. No reactions, just something sitting in the air. And then Eleanor stood up, slowly, unsteady. "I'm so tired." Her voice wasn't loud, but it stopped everything. Everyone looked at her. "You all walk into this house, pretending everything is fine." Her voice broke. "Until somebody breaks." No one moved. "You don't talk. You don't ask for help." Tears started falling now. "You just carry everything until it poisons everyone." The silence felt different this time. Not safe, not controlled, exposed. Eleanor looked at David. "You taught this family silence." That hit harder than anything Lucas said. Then Claire. "You think people only love you when you're perfect." Claire froze. Ben. "You think failure makes you worthless." He looked down immediately. Finally, Lucas. "And you," her voice softened, "run away before anyone can reject you." No one argued, because no one could. Then the last truth. "And I," a breath, "spent my whole life trying to save everyone, while slowly disappearing." No one moved, because for the first time, they didn't see a mother. They saw a person who was exhausted. And then she walked away. No yelling, no door slamming, just gone. Nobody followed her. That was the first thing that felt wrong. In most families, Someone goes after the person who leaves, to fix it, to calm it down, to pretend it didn't happen. But not this time, because for the first time, no one knew how. The house fell into silence, not the usual one, not the controlled, comfortable version they were used to. This one felt heavy. Claire stood up first, not to chase Eleanor, just to move, because sitting there felt impossible. She walked into the kitchen, poured herself a glass of wine, didn't drink it, just held it. Lucas was already there, leaning against the counter, looking like he hadn't slept in days. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Claire said quietly, "You didn't have to do it like that." Lucas let out a small breath. "I didn't plan to." Another pause. "You think she's right?" Claire asked. Lucas didn't answer immediately. Then, "Yeah." That hit harder than expected. Claire looked down at the glass in her hand, because deep down, she knew it too. "I stayed in my marriage longer than I should have," she said, not looking at him. Lucas glanced over slightly. "Why?" Claire laughed softly, but there was nothing funny about it. "Because I thought leaving meant failing." Silence again. Lucas nodded once. "He made it feel like that," Claire added. Lucas looked away. "He made all of us feel like that." That sentence sat between them, heavy, uncomfortable, true. Outside, on the back porch, Ben sat next to David. Neither of them had moved for minutes. Snow falling quietly in the dark. Ben finally spoke. "I lost my job." David didn't react. Not surprised, not shocked, just still. "When?" he asked. 4 months ago." Another pause. "You knew?" Ben asked. David nodded slightly. "You stopped talking about work." Ben let out a bitter laugh. "So everyone knew," he muttered, "except Mom." David didn't answer, because that was the pattern. Notice everything, say nothing. Ben rubbed his hands together, cold, or maybe just empty. "When you got laid off, did you feel like this?" he asked. David looked at him, really looked this time. "Yes." That was it. No speech, no advice, just yes. And somehow, that honesty did more than anything else he could have said. Inside the house, Emily sat alone at the dining table, plates still half full, glasses untouched. She looked around the room, at the empty chairs, at the mess nobody was cleaning. And for the first time, she didn't feel confused. She felt clarity, because adults always acted like they had everything together. But tonight, she saw the truth. They were just people. People who didn't know how to say what they felt. People who thought silence made things easier. People who carried pain until it showed up like this. Back in the kitchen, Claire finally took a sip of her wine. Lucas looked at her. "You okay?" he asked. Claire thought about it. Actually, thought. Then shook her head. "No." It was such a simple answer. But in that house, it was the most honest thing anyone had said in years. And that's when something changed. Not fixed, not resolved, but shifted. Because for the first time, they weren't pretending anymore. The house didn't go back to normal that night. No one cleaned up. No one turned on the TV. No one tried to reset the mood. Because something had already shifted. And pretending it didn't happen felt impossible now. Later that night, Ben was still outside with David. The cold didn't bother them. Or maybe they just didn't notice. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Ben asked something he had never asked before. "Were you ever scared?" David frowned slightly. "Of what?" Ben hesitated, then said it anyway. "Of failing." That word sat between them, heavy. David didn't answer right away, because men like him don't usually admit that, but tonight wasn't usual. Yes, Ben looked over. David kept staring ahead. When I was your age, he said slowly, my father used to tell me a man without work was useless. Ben didn't interrupt. I believed that, David continued. For a long time, a pause. So when things went wrong, he added quietly, I thought everything would fall apart. Ben swallowed, because suddenly his fear had a source, not weakness, not failure, inheritance. I wasn't trying to pressure you, David said. Ben let out a quiet breath. I know. Another pause. But you did, Ben added. David nodded. I know. That was new. No defense, no explanation, just acceptance. Inside the house, Claire sat alone on the stairs, thinking, not about the argument, but about a question she had never really asked herself. What if I wasn't trying to succeed, but trying not to disappoint? The thought didn't feel dramatic. It felt accurate. And for the first time, that scared her more than failure ever had. Because if that was true, then everything she built was never really hers. The house was quieter now, not tense, not forced, just honest. Claire found Lucas in the kitchen again. Same spot, same posture, like he hadn't really moved all night. You ever think about coming back? She asked. Lucas didn't look at her. I did. That surprised her. Then why didn't you? Lucas let out a small breath. Because I knew nothing would change. Claire leaned against the counter. Something changed tonight. Lucas shook his head slightly. No, he said. This just finally showed what was already there. That landed, because he wasn't wrong. Claire looked down at her hands. I thought I was the one who figured it out, she said. Lucas glanced at her. What do you mean? I stayed, Claire continued. I did everything right, built the life he respected. A pause. I thought that meant I understood how this family works. Lucas didn't interrupt. But I didn't, she said quietly. Another pause. I just adapted better. Lucas gave a slight nod. Yeah, that word carried more weight than agreement, because it connected everything. We all adapted, Lucas added, just in different ways. Claire looked at him. You ran, Lucas shrugged slightly. Before I got pushed out, Claire let out a soft breath. I stayed, she said. Lucas nodded. Until it broke you anyway. That one hit. Not aggressively, not cruelly, just true. Claire didn't argue, because for the first time, she didn't need to defend it. Ben tried to hold it together, Lucas continued, until he couldn't. Claire nodded slowly. And Mom, she added. Lucas exhaled. She carried everything. Silence, again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was understanding, not forgiveness, not resolution, just clarity. And sometimes, that's where healing actually starts. David didn't go back inside right away. He stayed on the porch. Long after Ben had gone in, long after the house went quiet, snow kept falling, slow, steady. He barely noticed, because for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about work or money or what needed to be fixed. He was thinking about them, not who they became, but who they used to be. Claire, as a kid, always asking if she did it right, even when it didn't matter. Ben, trying so hard to keep up, even when no one told him he had to. Lucas, following him everywhere, until one day he didn't. David rubbed his hands together, not because he was cold, because something didn't sit right anymore. "I was trying to help them," he said quietly. The sentence felt familiar, safe, but tonight, it didn't feel true, or at least not complete. Because if that was true, why did they all feel the same thing? Pressure. He leaned back in the chair. "My father used to say a man without work is useless." He had repeated that belief his entire life, without ever questioning it. Not as a rule, as a warning, a way to protect them. But now, he could see something else. Fear doesn't disappear when you pass it on. It multiplies. And somewhere along the way, what he thought was protection became expectation. And expectation became pressure. David closed his eyes for a moment. He tried to remember the last time he asked any of them what they actually wanted. He couldn't. That realization sat heavier than anything Lucas had said, because it wasn't accusation. It was absence. And absence is harder to defend. Inside the house, he could hear them, talking, not arguing, talking. And for the first time, he realized something simple. They didn't need him to control anything. They needed him to understand. David didn't make a speech that night. He didn't go back inside and fix everything, didn't apologize, didn't explain. Because for the first time, he realized talking wasn't the problem. It was how he showed up. So he did something different. The next morning, he woke up earlier than everyone else. The house was quiet. For a moment, it felt like every other Thanksgiving morning. But it wasn't, because this time, he was paying attention to the silence, to the space, to what had actually happened. He walked into the kitchen, started making coffee, burned the first batch, didn't throw it away, made another, small things. Lucas walked in a few minutes later. There was a moment, the kind that usually gets avoided. David didn't avoid it. He didn't say much, just slid a cup across the counter. Black. No sugar. Lucas looked at it, then at him. "Thanks," he said. That was it. No tension, no pressure, just normal. And somehow, that felt bigger than anything they said the night before. Later that morning, Ben started cooking breakfast. Badly. Eggs overcooked. Toast burnt. Nobody complained. Claire laughed. Actually laughed. Emily filmed everything like it was chaos worth remembering. And Eleanor sat at the table, watching, not fixing, not managing, just there. For the first time in years, David noticed that too. He didn't tell her to rest, didn't take over. He just stayed in the room, present, not perfect, but different. And sometimes, change doesn't start with big decisions. It starts with moments like this. Quiet, small, repeated, until they become something real. The house didn't become perfect after that. There were no big transformations, no sudden peace, no moment where everything just worked. That's not how families change. They don't fix themselves overnight. They shift, slowly, through small things that repeat often enough to mean something. Sunday dinners continued, not because anyone said they had to, but because no one wanted to lose this again. Sometimes they were quiet, sometimes awkward, sometimes nothing important was said. But people showed up. Claire stayed longer after dinner, even when she didn't need to. Ben started talking more, not about everything, but more than before. Lucas didn't disappear. That was the biggest difference. He didn't stay all the time, didn't suddenly become the son who came back. but he showed up. And that mattered. David noticed all of it, not in the way he used to, not evaluating, not measuring, just noticing. One evening, he sat alone in the garage. The old workshop smelled like dust and wood. Lucas's guitar leaned against the wall, untouched. David stared at it for a long time, then quietly said something out loud. I wasted a lot of time. No one heard it, except him, and for the first time, that was enough. Later that night, Lucas came in. He saw the guitar, paused. You kept it? He asked. David nodded. Of course. Lucas picked it up slowly, ran his fingers across the strings. Out of tune, dusty, but still there. He played a few notes, soft, uncertain. David didn't interrupt, didn't correct, didn't comment. He just listened, really listened. And that was new. After a minute, Lucas stopped. You used to hate that, he said. David shook his head. I didn't hate it. A pause. I just didn't understand it. Lucas looked at him. And if you don't understand something, he said, you assume it's wrong. David nodded slowly. I did. Another pause. Then he said it. I'm sorry. Simple. No explanation. No defense. Just real. Lucas didn't respond right away, because some words take time to land. Then he stepped forward and hugged him. Not perfectly, not emotionally overwhelming, just honest. David held on to him longer than expected, because somewhere inside that moment, he understood something too late, but not too late to matter. You don't lose your children in one big moment. You lose them in small ones, the ones where you don't listen, don't see them, don't ask who they actually are. And you don't get them back with one apology. You get them back the same way you lost them, moment by moment, choice by choice. Later that night, the house was quiet again, but it felt different, not empty, full, not because everything was fixed, but because for the first time, nothing was being hidden. Claire stood in the hallway watching everyone, Ben laughing in the kitchen, Emily arguing about something meaningless, Lucas sitting on the floor, tuning the guitar, David nearby, not saying much, just there. And suddenly, she understood something simple. Healing doesn't erase what happened. It just proves what happened isn't stronger than what's still here. For a while, things stayed steady, not perfect, but steady enough to feel real. And that's when life tested them again. It didn't come as a fight, didn't come as another argument. It came quietly. Eleanor collapsed one afternoon, not dramatic, no warning signs anyone paid attention to, just years of stress, finally catching up. The hospital room was silent. White walls, soft machines, and for the first time, everyone was there at the same time, not for a holiday, not for tradition, but because they had no choice. Claire stood near the window. Ben sat with his head down. Emily scrolled her phone without seeing anything. Lucas leaned against the wall, and David sat beside Eleanor, holding her hand, something he hadn't done in years. She's going to be okay, Claire said. David nodded, but he didn't respond, because for the first time, he wasn't thinking about outcomes. He was thinking about time, how much of it he had spent, believing there would always be more. Later that night, the doctor said she needed to rest, less stress, more support, simple words. But everyone in that room understood what they meant. This wasn't just about Eleanor. It was about all of them, what they carried, what they avoided, what they never said. Back at the house, no one turned on the lights right away. The space felt different, not broken, but exposed. Claire spoke first. "We can't go back to how it was." No one disagreed. Ben looked up. "I don't even know what better looks like," he said. Lucas nodded. "It doesn't have to be better," he replied. "Just real." Silence. Then all eyes went to David. Because for years, he was the one who defined what this family looked like. And now, he had to choose something different. David sat there for a moment, not rushing, not reacting. Then he said something none of them expected. "I don't know how to fix this." That alone changed everything, because it wasn't control, it was honesty. "But I know I don't want to lose any of you again," he added. Claire looked away. Ben exhaled slowly. Lucas stayed still, because that sentence wasn't about authority. It was about fear, real fear. And for the first time, they didn't see a father trying to lead. They saw a man trying not to lose his family. "We'll figure it out," Claire said quietly. Not confident, not perfect, but willing. Ben nodded. Lucas hesitated, then finally said, "I'm not going anywhere." That was it. Not a promise, not a speech, just a decision. And sometimes that's all a family needs. Not perfection, not resolution, just people choosing to stay. The weeks after felt unfamiliar, not because everything changed, but because nothing was being ignored anymore. Conversations were awkward, honesty was uncomfortable, but it was real. And real was something they had been missing for a long time. The truth is, nothing about that family became perfect. They still had bad days, still had silence, still had moments where old habits almost came back. But something had changed. They stopped pretending. And once you stop pretending, you can't go back to living like everything is fine. Years later, Emily would remember that Thanksgiving the most. Not because it was loud, not because it was dramatic, but because it was the first time everyone told the truth. And that changed everything. Because in the end, families don't fall apart because people stop loving each other. They fall apart because people stop showing it in a way that can be felt. And sometimes, love isn't fixing everything. It's staying. It's listening. It's choosing to come back, even after everything. So I'll ask you something. If you were sitting at that table after everything that was said, after everything that came out, what would you do? Would you stay and try to rebuild something real? Or would you walk away and never look back? Be honest. Comment 1 if you would stay and fix it. Comment 2 if you would leave for good. I'm reading every answer.